I'm a 48-year-old woman. I was fired from the company I helped build for 20 years because our new Generation Z intern filed a human resources complaint against me for telling a joke from the movie Ace Ventura. I thought I was being canceled by an overly sensitive generation. The truth was, he was the best friend of an employee I had fired for theft 6 months prior. And this was his revenge. I am a 48-year-old woman, or maybe I should say, I was. Some days, I feel much older, ancient even, like a fossil from a forgotten corporate era trapped in amber. For 2 decades, my entire identity was completely intertwined with my job. I was Susan, the senior marketing director for a mid-sized tech firm called Innovatech. I joined the company when it was just 5 people crammed into a tiny, stuffy office above a laundromat that always smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. I remember our first major client presentation. Our ancient second-hand projector broke down mid-pitch, spewing a pathetic puff of smoke, so I ended up drawing all the data graphs by hand on a whiteboard, while our chief executive officer ad-libbed the entire presentation. We landed the account. I was there when we celebrated that win by buying the most expensive champagne a local convenience store could offer and drinking it out of mismatched coffee mugs, because we did not own any actual glasses. I was the one who stayed up for 48 hours straight with the lead engineers, fueled by stale pizza and a terrifying amount of caffeine, to make sure our first major product launch went off without a hitch. I helped grow that company, brick by painstaking brick, campaign by stressful campaign, into a thriving multi-million-dollar business with a sleek, minimalist downtown office that had its own kombucha tap and sleeping pods for developers. I was not just an employee, I was a builder. My management style is a product of my generation, Generation X. I am direct. I am results-oriented. I believe in working hard. And I have high expectations for my team, because I have even higher expectations for myself. But I also fought for them tooth and nail. I was the one who stormed into the chief financial officer's office with a mountain of data and a 30-slide presentation to secure the biggest bonuses on our floor after a record-breaking quarter. I was the one who argued for the best training budgets, who went to bat for every single promotion my people deserved, often putting my own political capital on the line. When our lead copywriter's mother passed away, the entire team covered his workload for 2 weeks, without a single complaint, so he could be with his family. I truly believed we were a work family, a group of people bound by a shared history and a common goal. That belief now seems like a relic from a bygone era, a naive and foolish fantasy that shattered into a million pieces. The story of how my career, my reputation, and a significant part of my identity were systematically dismantled begins with the arrival of an intern named Liam. Liam was 21 years old, a top student from a top university, and on paper, he was a hiring manager's dream come true. His resume was flawless, packed with achievements, leadership roles in student organizations, and a perfect grade point average. He was sharp, incredibly tech-savvy, and understood the labyrinthine nuances of social media algorithms on an almost cellular level. During his interview, he blew everyone away, including me. He was not cocky, he was just possessed of a serene, unshakable confidence. He asked insightful questions that showed he had not just read our website, but had analyzed our last 3 quarterly reports and had identified a potential weakness in our competitors' strategy that we ourselves had overlooked. We hired him for a 3-month summer internship, and from his very first day, he was an undeniable star. His work was impeccable, turned in ahead of schedule, and exceeding all expectations in both creativity and execution. He was polite, almost unnervingly professional, and seemed to absorb complex information like a sponge. The whole team was impressed. I was more than impressed. I was thrilled. I saw him as the future of our team, a golden boy I could mentor and shape into a future leader. I imagined him, years from now, taking over my role, and the thought filled me with a sense of pride and continuity. I saw my legacy in him. The first crack in this perfect facade appeared about a month into his internship. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and we were in a high-stakes team meeting in the main conference room, the one with the panoramic city view that was supposed to inspire creative thinking. We were brainstorming a new campaign for a notoriously difficult client, a legacy brand that was losing its grip on the younger market. The energy in the room was sluggish. The ideas were stale, and we were hitting a wall. The pressure was mounting from the executive suite. Trying to break the tension and lighten the mood, I did what I have always done. I made a stupid, goofy joke. We were talking about how a new software feature was a perfect fit for the client's needs. A seamless integration. Without even thinking, I leaned back in my chair, spread my hands wide, and said in a goofy, over-the-top voice, "Like a glove." It was a dumb, harmless quote from Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, a movie that was a cultural touchstone when I was in my 20s. The rest of the team, mostly millennials in their 30s, who had grown up with my management style, reacted predictably. Sarah, my senior manager and a woman I considered a close friend, chuckled. Ben, a graphic designer, gave a good-natured groan and shook his head with a smile. They knew my sense of humor was a bit dated, a collection of 90s pop culture references that sometimes landed and sometimes did not. But Liam did not react at all. He just stared at me from across the polished mahogany table with a completely blank, unreadable expression. His eyes were like glass, devoid of any emotion. There was no flicker of amusement, confusion, or even disdain. He just stared, his posture perfectly still. The moment hung in the air for a second too long, and the easy atmosphere in the room evaporated, replaced by a sudden, awkward silence. We moved on, but his intense non-reaction stuck with me. It was a bit strange, a bit jarring, but I ultimately brushed it off as a simple generational gap. He probably had no idea what movie I was even referencing. I did not give it a second thought. That was my first, and perhaps most critical, mistake. Update 1. 2 hours after the meeting, an email from Liam appeared in my inbox. The subject line was, "Following up on this afternoon's meeting." I smiled to myself, assuming it was a summary of his ideas for the campaign, a sign of his proactive and ambitious nature. I opened it, ready to be impressed. I was not impressed. I was horrified. It was not a summary. It was a long, incredibly formal email written in the detached, academic language of a sociology paper. It was a thesis on my failure as a leader, a meticulously crafted indictment. He wrote that he felt it was his professional and ethical duty to inform me that my comment had contributed to a workplace environment that felt, in his words, non-inclusive and psychologically unsafe. He explained in painstaking, numbered detail that the film Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, is considered highly problematic and transphobic by modern critical standards, particularly in its portrayal of a specific character. He stated that quoting it, even in jest and completely out of context, could be seen as a microaggression that alienates LGBTQ+ team members and trivializes their lived experiences. He argued that it signaled a lack of awareness and cultural competency on my part, which could call my leadership capabilities into question in the eyes of younger employees. He included 2 links at the bottom of the email. One to a lengthy think piece article from a progressive online magazine that deconstructed the film's problematic legacy, and another to a corporate blog post from a direct competitor about the importance of inclusive language in the modern workplace. The implication was clear. I was a dinosaur, and our competitors were more evolved. I had to read the email twice to fully process the sheer audacity of it. A hot flash of anger washed over me. This was not a conversation. It was a lecture. It was a threat. A silly, context-free quote had been weaponized against me. My first impulse was to call him into my office and dress him down for his breathtaking arrogance and complete lack of professional perspective. But I took a deep breath. I thought about the optics. He was young, he was an intern. Maybe this is just how his generation handles conflict, through formal, documented, and impersonal channels designed to leave a paper trail. So I chose to be the bigger person, the mature manager who could take feedback. I wrote back a short, concise, and professionally courteous reply. I wrote that I appreciated him sharing his perspective, but I certainly meant no offense. and that I would be more mindful of my references in the future. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had successfully de-escalated a delicate situation. I forwarded the email chain to Sarah, my senior manager, with a note that just said, "Can you believe this?" She came over to my desk a few minutes later, her eyes wide. She told me the kid was wound way too tight, that it was a ridiculous overreaction. Her support was a comfort, a small island of sanity in what was starting to feel like a very strange sea. I had no idea that I had just walked into the first move of a meticulously planned checkmate, and that my professional response would be twisted and used as Exhibit A in the case against me, proof of my dismissive attitude. Update 2. A week went by, and it was the longest week of my career. The tension between me and Liam was palpable. It was a cold, heavy thing that sat in the middle of our open plan office, and everyone could feel it. He became even quieter, almost robotic in his professionalism. He avoided all eye contact with me. If we passed in the hallway, he would stare intently at his phone as if reading the most important message of his life. He would only communicate with me via email, sending terse, formal messages about his projects, even if we were sitting 20 feet apart. It was deeply uncomfortable, but his work remained flawless, so I tried to rise above it, to lead by example and not let his behavior disrupt the team. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I received a calendar invitation from the head of Human Resources, a woman named Diana, for a mandatory meeting that afternoon. The subject was simply check-in. I was not worried. I had a good relationship with Diana, or so I believed. We had worked together for over a decade. I assumed it was a routine catch-up about staffing for the next quarter. I walked into Diana's office at the scheduled time, and she was not smiling. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by a rigid, uncomfortable corporate mask. She asked me to sit down, avoiding my eyes. She had a thick file open on her desk, the company logo staring up at me. She told me, in a flat, rehearsed tone, that a formal, anonymous complaint had been filed against me. The complaint alleged that I had fostered a hostile and non-inclusive work environment. It cited a specific example, my quoting of a known transphobic movie in a team meeting. It also included my dismissive email response as evidence that I was not genuinely open to feedback on these important matters. My blood ran cold. The air in the room felt thin, and a buzzing started in my ears. I knew with absolute, soul-crushing certainty that the anonymous complaint was from Liam. I explained the context, the silly nature of the joke, my attempt to de-escalate the situation via email. Diana, a woman my own age who I had considered a friend and a peer, looked sympathetic but firm. She gave me a practiced, sorrowful look and said that in this day and age, context does not matter as much as impact. She said the company had a zero-tolerance policy for any language that could be perceived as non-inclusive. She informed me that a formal warning would be placed in my permanent employment file, and that I was required to complete a 4-hour online sensitivity and inclusion training course by the end of the week. I was stunned into silence. A formal warning. After 20 years of dedicated service, of glowing performance reviews without a single complaint ever filed against me. Over a Jim Carrey movie. I was being formally disciplined like a child. That evening, I sat at my dining room table, a glass of wine untouched beside me, clicking through a patronizing, box-ticking online course. It was the single most humiliating experience of my professional life. The course was called Cultivating a Conscious Workplace, and it was filled with poorly acted video scenarios of office interactions. In one, a manager named Bob asked his team if they had the bandwidth for a new project, and the video paused to explain how this could be an ableist microaggression. I had to answer a multiple-choice question on what Bob should have said instead. The correct answer was a long, convoluted sentence that sounded like it had been written by a lawyer. I clicked through modules on privilege and power dynamics and the spectrum of identity, my anger growing with each condescending quiz. It felt less like education and more like ideological reprogramming, designed to make me feel ashamed of my own common sense. The entire experience was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. The war had begun, and I was already losing badly. Update 3. The weeks following the human resources meeting were a form of psychological torture. The atmosphere on my team, once collaborative, energetic, and fun, became strained and fearful. Liam's presence was like a black hole, sucking all the warmth and spontaneity out of the room. He was a model intern on the surface, his work always perfect, his demeanor always polite. But his politeness was a weapon. It was a cold, glassy professionalism that put everyone on edge. He was an undercover agent, a spy, in our midst, and we all knew it. I noticed he was always on his phone during meetings, his thumbs moving furiously. I initially assumed he was just bored or texting friends, a typical Generation Z habit. I would later learn he was taking detailed notes in a secure app, creating a log of my every word and action, twisting my casual language to fit his malicious narrative. He was building a dossier. He also started to subtly and expertly turn my own team against me. He would have quiet, serious conversations with the younger employees, particularly a 24-year-old designer named Chloe. I saw them once, heads bent together in the break room, Chloe looking concerned and nodding as Liam spoke in a low, urgent tone. A few days later, Chloe, who had always been sweet and eager to please, began to challenge me in passive-aggressive ways. She would question my creative direction in team-wide emails, copying my boss, something she had never done before. Later, Sarah showed me a screenshot from a private Slack channel the junior employees had. In it, Liam had written, "Just had a one-on-one with Susan. She told me my concept was a bit weak, and 2, punch it up. So condescending and unconstructive. She literally provided no psychological safety for creative feedback." Chloe had replied with a sad face emoji and wrote, She did that to me last week. It's so boomer. Just say what you want, don't be passive-aggressive." The phrase, punch it up, had been a standard piece of creative feedback in this industry for 30 years. But he had reframed it as a personal attack. He was a master manipulator, framing normal, decades-old, generational differences in communication as grave moral failings on my part. The real escalation, the move that took this from an internal conflict to a public threat, came a month before his internship was due to end. Sarah, my loyal senior manager, pulled me aside with a worried look on her face. She sent me a link to a TikTok video. It was from an anonymous account with a generic username, a faceless narrator using a distorted, robotic voice. The video was a slickly edited montage of corporate stock footage with bold text overlays. It began with the title, "Signs You Work for a Toxic Boomer Manager at a Major Tech Company." It then listed a series of problematic statements and behaviors. Things like, "Hey guys, can we circle back on this?" was framed as non-gender inclusive language. "I need this on my desk by 5, was framed as a disregard for mental health and boundaries. "Let's work hard and play hard," was presented as promoting a toxic, alcohol-fueled work culture. And there it was, the third item on the list, making jokes from problematic 90s movies. The video was vague enough to be legally deniable, but it was specific enough that anyone in my department, or even our wider industry, would know exactly who it was about. It had over 1 million views. The comment section was a cesspool of righteous fury, a digital mob of teenagers and people in their early 20s, calling for this anonymous manager to be fired immediately. One comment with over 5,000 likes read, "Oh my God, fire Karen immediately. She's a walking human resources violation." Another said, "This is why we need unions. Protect the kids from these dinosaur managers who think bullying is leadership." I felt sick to my stomach. This was a public execution, and I could not even defend myself. I reported the video to Human Resources, but they said that since it was anonymous and did not mention me or the company by name, their hands were tied. They were useless, paralyzed by fear. Update 4. The viral TikTok video sent the company's executive leadership into a full-blown panic. They were not concerned with the truth or with my 20 years of loyalty. They were terrified of a public relations nightmare, of being the next company to be canceled on social media. The vague accusations were enough to make them see me as a toxic asset, a liability that needed to be managed, which in corporate speak means eliminated. The week leading up to my firing was surreal. My boss David, who used to pop by my desk multiple times a day to chat, suddenly found reasons to be in meetings whenever I walked by his office. The chief technology officer, a man I'd pulled an all-nighter with just a year ago to fix a server crash, gave me a tight, panicked smile in the elevator, and then stared at the floor. The chill was unmistakable. The final blow came a week later. I was summoned to a meeting with David and Diana from Human Resources. I walked into the main boardroom and knew, instantly, that this was it. They had the same grim, funereal expressions on their faces. They looked like they were about to euthanize a beloved family pet. They told me that Liam had come forward. He had dropped the anonymous act. He had presented them with a 12-page, single-spaced document that he had been compiling for the past 2 months. It was his dossier. It was a meticulously detailed list of my alleged offenses, complete with dates, times, and supposed witnesses, including Chloe. It was a masterpiece of malicious framing. Every casual comment I had ever made, every direct piece of feedback, every late night we had ever worked to hit a deadline, was twisted into a microaggression or an act of calculated bullying. He had listed my Ace Ventura joke as Incident Zero, the event that had awakened him to the systemic nature of the toxic and problematic environment. My request for Chloe to double-check her work was listed as an act of public shaming designed to undermine a junior female employee's confidence. A time I had sighed during a long meeting was documented as, quote, creating a hostile and passive-aggressive atmosphere. He had framed his entire internship not as a learning experience, but as the brave, harrowing journey of a whistleblower fighting against a corrupt and outdated system. My boss, David, could not even look me in the eye. He just stared at his hands, which were trembling slightly, as he spoke the rehearsed, soulless corporate script. "Susan, look," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "We both know you built this department, but the climate has changed. This document and the social media situation, it's just too much risk. The board is concerned about the brand." He said the company was moving in a new direction and that my leadership style was no longer a fit for their evolving corporate culture. They offered me a generous severance package, contingent on my signing a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement that would effectively silence me forever. After 20 years of loyalty, of 60-hour work weeks, of sacrificing family vacations and my own personal life to help build that company from the ground up, I was being fired. I was being replaced by a culture defined by a 21-year-old intern who had been there for less than 3 months. I looked at my boss, at Diana, and I saw nothing but pure, unadulterated cowardice. I pushed the NDA back across the table with 2 fingers and told them I would not be signing it. I would not be silenced. I stood up, walked back to my desk to the deafening silence of the open plan office. Everyone was pretending to be engrossed in their work, but I could feel their eyes on me. I packed my personal belongings in a cardboard box. A framed photo of my team after we won the industry award, my favorite coffee mug, a stupid little stress ball. As I walked towards the exit, box in hand, I saw Liam. He was standing by the kombucha tap, talking to Chloe. He wasn't smiling. He just watched me, his face a perfect mask of calm, professional indifference. But as I passed, I saw a flicker in his eyes, a tiny, almost imperceptible glint of triumphant satisfaction. He had won. I walked out of the building I had practically considered a second home, and did not look back. Update 5. The 2 months after I was fired were a blur of shame, anger, and a deep, suffocating depression that felt like a physical weight on my chest. My professional network, once a source of strength and opportunity, was suddenly cold and distant. The story, or at least Liam's carefully crafted version of it, had spread like wildfire through the industry. I was radioactive. I was the toxic boomer manager from the TikTok video. No one would touch me. I spent my days sending out resumes that went into a black hole of automated rejection emails, and my nights replaying every interaction, every word, wondering what I could have done differently. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I really the monster he had painted me as? Had I been a terrible, abusive manager for 20 years and just never known it? The self-doubt was a cancer, eating me alive from the inside out. I had to put my house on the market. The severance offer I had refused to sign was gone, and my savings were dwindling at an alarming rate. The truth came to light in the most mundane way. I was in my home office, boxing up old files in preparation for the move, when I found an old backup hard drive with personal files from my work computer. On it were copies of performance reviews I had conducted over the years, something I had saved for my own records. I was about to wipe the drive clean when I saw a name that made me pause. It was the name of a junior graphic designer who had been on my team for about a year. Let's call him Mark. I had fired Mark about 6 months before Liam had even started. The firing was for a severe and undeniable reason. Mark had been caught red-handed, plagiarizing a portfolio of work from an award-winning designer in Europe and passing it off as his own for a major client pitch. It was a catastrophic breach of ethics and trust that could have gotten the company sued. When confronted with the irrefutable proof, side-by-side comparisons of his work and the original, he became incredibly hostile, denied everything, and threatened to sue for wrongful termination. It was an ugly but absolutely necessary termination to protect the integrity of the team and the company. In the chaos of the following months, I had almost forgotten about him. Out of sheer, idle curiosity, I did a quick social media search for Mark. His profiles were private, but I found his LinkedIn. He was now working at another company. I scrolled through his connections and his recent activity. And then I saw it. A post from 3 weeks ago. It was a screenshot of a company-wide announcement from my old firm. The announcement was congratulating Liam on accepting a full-time, permanent position as a, quote, junior social media strategist. It was a brand new role, a promotion that had essentially been created just for him. And in the comments section of this post, there was a single, celebratory message. It read, "Yes, you did it, knew you would, justice is served." The comment was from Mark. A cold, electric feeling shot through me. Justice? What justice? I clicked on Mark's profile again, my heart pounding. I scrolled through his list of connections, searching for Liam's name. They were connected. I looked closer at their profiles, at their education history. They had gone to the same high school. I did a deeper search on other platforms and found tagged photos, pictures of them together from years ago, at parties, on a camping trip. They were not just colleagues or acquaintances. They were close. They were best friends. And suddenly, the past 3 months snapped into horrifying, crystal-clear focus. This was never about a joke. It was never about microaggressions or an inclusive workplace. It was not a generational clash. It was a long, calculated, and malicious revenge plot. Liam had targeted me from day one to avenge his friend. He had used the language of social justice and corporate HR as a Trojan horse, as a weapon, to destroy the person who had fired his buddy for cause. I was not a casualty of the culture wars. I was the victim of a conspiracy. Update 6. The discovery of Liam and Mark's connection did not erase the damage, but it cauterized the wound. The crushing self-doubt that had been poisoning me for months was replaced by a white-hot, clarifying anger. I was not crazy. I was not a monster. I had been deliberately and methodically set up. I spent the next week acting like the director I had been for 20 years. I went into project management mode. I gathered evidence. I screenshotted the LinkedIn posts, the comments, the photos proving their long-standing friendship. I wrote a detailed timeline, cross-referencing the date of Mark's termination with the date of Liam's hiring and the start of his campaign against me. I documented everything with the cold precision of an archivist. Then I called a lawyer. I did my research, and I found the most ruthless employment lawyer in the city. I walked into her office with my dossier, a mirror image of the one Liam had used against me. I laid out the entire story, the joke, the HR complaint, the TikTok, the firing, and the final damning evidence of the revenge plot. When I finished, she did not look sympathetic, she looked hungry. She leaned forward and told me that I did not just have a case for wrongful termination, I had a case for defamation and a civil conspiracy to interfere with my employment. Because I had refused to sign the NDA, I was free to take any legal action I wanted. The company had chosen to believe the word of a 21-year-old intern on a personal vendetta over a loyal, 20-year veteran employee. They had not done their due diligence. They had acted out of fear and public relations panic. And now, they were going to pay for their cowardice. Last week, my lawyer filed the lawsuit. We are suing both the company for wrongful termination and Liam personally for defamation and conspiracy. The company's legal team has already reached out to my lawyer, their tone dramatically different from when they had so coldly fired me. They are already proposing a settlement. I have not decided if I will take it. Part of me wants to take this all the way to a public trial. I want the story of what they did, of what HE did, to be a matter of public record. My career, as I knew it, is over. My reputation has been permanently scarred. But I am not a victim anymore. I am a fighter. This is not about getting my old job back. I would never work for those cowards again. This is about getting my name, my reputation, and my story back. And I will not stop until I do.